Us humans, we're far from perfect. We strive for success and enjoy a challenge. We conquer and destroy. We try to bring peace by starting wars. We build cathedrals that scrape the sky, then watch them crumble. We create breathtaking art, then turn around and commit unspeakable atrocities. We reach for the stars, yet can't seem to solve the problems right here on our own planet. We're a walking contradiction, a beautiful mess. We're driven, ambitious, creative, and deeply, profoundly flawed. With all this imperfection baked into our very nature, can we ever hope to create something that's truly perfect? Can we, with our messy hands and messy minds, build a system, such as AI, that transcends our limitations? What does it mean to be perfect? To create something we could deem to be perfect? Perfect. Let's unpack that word, shall we? Because honestly, what the hell does it even mean? We throw it around like it's a universal constant, but it's about as slippery as a greased up eel. See, perfect depends on what you're measuring. Are we talking about cold, hard logic? Then yeah, maybe a computer spitting out flawless calculations is perfect. But what about emotional intelligence? Can a machine truly understand the messy, chaotic world of human feelings? And then there's creativity. Can a program write a symphony that makes your soul weep? Or paint a picture that captures the raw beauty of a sunset? Or maybe, the most important, can we build an AI that doesn't just parrot our own prejudices, but actually resists them? Each one of those perfects has a completely different damn standard. So before we move forward, I would like to define what is perfection, how it came to be, and its history. So perfection, it's one of those words that sounds simple, but it's a real mind bender when you dig into it. Officially, it's a state of completeness, flawlessness, or just straight up supreme excellence. Basically, it's the top of the mountain, the peak of whatever you're trying to achieve. But here's the thing, perfection isn't a one-size-fits-all deal. You've got mathematicians chasing perfect proofs, physicists hunting for perfect theories, chemists trying to create perfect reactions. Then you get into the squishier stuff, like ethics and aesthetics. What's a perfect moral act? What's a perfect piece of art? That's where things get really subjective, because what's perfect to one person might be a complete disaster to another. And let's not forget about the big guns, ontology and theology. We're talking about the nature of being and the nature of God. Philosophers and theologians have been wrestling with the concept of perfection for centuries, trying to figure out if it's even possible or if it's just a pipe dream. So the word perfection itself has gone through some serious linguistic gymnastics. In English, we used to have perfectness alongside perfection, but it all boils down to the Latin perfectio, which means a finishing or bringing to an end. And it's not just English. French, Italian, Spanish, Russian, Polish, you name it. They've all got their own versions of perfect derived from Latin. But if you really want to get to the roots, you got to go back to the Greeks. They used teleos, which was more about practical perfection, like a perfect doctor or a perfect play. It wasn't as abstract and over the top as our modern perfection. They translate teleiotis more like completeness to avoid all the baggage. And speaking of Greeks, Aristotle had a pretty solid definition. He said something's perfect if it's 1, complete and has all the parts, 2, it's so good, nothing better exists, and 3, it's achieved its purpose. That third one's the real kicker. It introduces this idea of function. Thomas Aquinas later built on this, distinguishing between something being perfect in itself and perfect in serving its purpose. Now, things got a bit muddled when perfection started getting mixed up with excellence. They're not the same thing. Excellence is about being better than others, while perfection is about being complete in yourself. Leibniz even argued that the world was the best of all possible worlds, but not perfect. It's a subtle but important distinction. Alright, now let's get into the real mind-bending stuff. The paradoxes of perfection. And trust me, this is where things get delightfully twisted. So we've got these two ideas of perfection floating around. The strict, flawless kind, and the looser, excellence kind. And this dual existence has led to a real head-scratcher, especially since the Renaissance. The idea that the greatest perfection is actually imperfection. Yeah, you heard that right. This was famously argued by Lucilio Vanini, a 17th century guy who was basically saying that if the world was perfect, it'd be stuck. It couldn't get any better, and therefore, it'd lack true perfection, which, according to him, relies on progress. He had some backup from Joseph Scaliger and even referenced the ancient Empedocles. Their argument, in a nutshell, was that perfection depends on incompleteness. Vanini even had a fancy Latin phrase for it, perfectio propter imperfectionem, perfection because of imperfection. It's like saying a blank canvas is more perfect than a finished painting because it has infinite potential. This ties into the whole Baroque aesthetic, which was all about getting the audience involved. Vanini and Marin Masserni were like, the best art isn't finished. It makes you think, it makes you imagine, it makes you work. And this paradox isn't just philosophical. It applies to real-world stuff too, like technology. Take semiconductors, for example. Those tiny chips that power everything, they need impurities to work. Irregularities, contaminants, those imperfections are what make them useful. The solution to this apparent paradox is realizing that we're talking about two different kinds of perfection. One is about regularity, flawless order. The other is about utility, getting the job done. And perfection is perfect in technology because it's useful. In physics and chemistry, perfect often means something that doesn't actually exist. It's an ideal, a theoretical limit, a way to simplify complex stuff. Take physics. You got things like a perfectly rigid body, which is supposed to be something that doesn't bend or break no matter how much force you throw at it. But guess what? That's just a fantasy. Nothing in the real world is that indestructible. It's a useful concept, but it's not real. Same goes for a perfectly plastic body, which is supposed to deform infinitely under constant pressure, or a perfect black body, which absorbs all radiation, or a perfect crystal with no flaws, or a perfect fluid, which is both incompressible and non-viscous. All of these perfect things are just mental models, idealizations. They're like the unicorns of the science world, beautiful but imaginary. And then there's the perfect gas, which is a classic example. It's a gas made up of molecules that don't interact with each other and have no volume. It's complete fiction, but it's incredibly useful for understanding how real gases behave. These perfect concepts are important because they set the boundaries, the extremes that real-world stuff can approach but never quite reach. And here's something crazy. The perfect gas equation, which is the foundation for a lot of gas laws, came from studying real gases. Robert Boyle, Edmund Marriott, and Joseph Louis Gay-Lussac were trying to figure out how real gases worked, and in the process, they stumbled upon the rules for a gas that doesn't exist. And I don't know about you, but I think that's pretty cool. Alright, let's dive into the ethical minefield of perfection. This is where things get really messy, because we're not talking about flawless machines or perfect crystals, we're talking about whether humans should be perfect, and if so, how the hell we're supposed to pull that off. Plato didn't use the word perfection much, but his concept of good was basically the same thing. He thought that getting closer to the idea of perfection made people perfect. It's like chasing a shadow hoping it'll rub off on you. Then came the Stoics, those ancient badasses who were all about harmony. They said perfection was about being in sync with nature, reason, and yourself. They even thought anyone could achieve it, which is pretty optimistic. Plato and the Stoics made perfection a philosophical buzzword. And then Christianity came along and turned it into a religious one. Be ye therefore perfect, the Bible says, even as your Father which is in heaven is perfect. No pressure, right? Early Christian writers were all about perfection, using words like undefiled, blameless, and holy. Augustine even argued that you're perfect if you're trying to be perfect, which is a bit like getting a participation trophy for being a decent human. But here's the catch. The Bible also throws some serious shade on the idea of human perfection. If we say that we have no sin, we deceive ourselves, it says. And Jesus himself was like, why call me good? Only God is good. So, even the big guy was questioning whether humans could ever truly be perfect. This led to a whole lot of theological issues in the early church, with Pelagius arguing that humans could achieve perfection on their own, and Augustine saying it could only happen through divine grace. Augustine won that round. The church never fully condemned the idea that humans could rise to perfection through contemplation, so there's always been this tension between human effort and divine intervention. And while the ancient philosophers saw perfection as harmony, Christianity saw it as a charity, or love. Above all these things put on charity, which is the bond of perfectness, Paul wrote. The medieval concept of perfection was all about development, both personal and social. It was like saying you're not just responsible for yourself, but for your role in society. Even today, the church is still wrestling with this stuff, and they say you need desire, grace, and constant effort to achieve perfection. And you have to be faithful in the little things, not just the big ones. Then things got weird. The 14th century was all about ontological perfection, the 15th about artistic perfection, and the 16th about God's grace. The Counter-Reformation was a wild time, with saints like Teresa of Avila and John of the Cross trying to reach perfection through extreme measures. The 17th century brought about Jansenism and Quietism, which were basically saying you're screwed without grace, and you might as well just sit around and wait for it. The 18th century secularized perfection, making it about nature and reason. They argued primitive man was perfect because he was closer to nature, or that civilization perfected man by making him more rational. This led to a whole debate about whether perfection was in the past or the future, with Rousseau and others romanticizing the Golden Age. By the 19th century, perfection was all about human progress. It was about being rational, healthy, happy, and comfortable. They even came up with fancy words like culture and civilization to describe this new kind of perfection. And while science and technology have made us focus more on improvement than perfection, the question of moral perfection is still kicking around. Today, we're a bit more chill about it. Vladislav Tatarkievich was like, don't bother trying to be perfect, just be a decent human. Which honestly is probably the best advice anyone's ever given, but since we're striving for perfection in this video, we're gonna ignore it for now. Alright, let's wade into the deep end of the philosophical pool. Ontology and theology, and how they've grappled with the concept of perfection. In the ancient Greek world, things were a bit murky. Anaximander and Xenophanes talked about the world being endless and greatest, but not necessarily perfect. Parmenides, though, was a bit of an outlier. He saw existence itself as finished entirely. He thought true existence was one, constant, unchanging, and perfect. He even thought the world was finite and spherical, which to him was a mark of perfection. Plato kind of agreed, seeing the world as the handiwork of a good demiurge, resulting in order, harmony, and perfection. But he stopped short of calling the demiurge himself perfect, because, perfection implies limits, and the creator shouldn't have limits. The Stoics were the first to really say that the divinity was perfect, because they equated it with the word itself. Cicero was all about the world being all-encompassing and therefore perfect. Then came the Scholastics, which are medieval thinkers who try to blend Greek philosophy with Christian theology. They linked the concept of a first cause with God and started attributing things like immutability and timelessness to the divine. But they still held back on calling God perfect because, again, perfection implies finitude. There was also this Platonist-influenced view that the absolute, the source of everything, was beyond human comprehension, beyond any concepts, including perfection. Thomas Aquinas, following Aristotle, defined perfection as having everything you're supposed to have, lacking nothing. He saw the world as a mix of perfect and imperfect things, with God allowing imperfections for the greater good. Duns Scotus took a simpler approach, saying perfection is just better to have than not have. He saw it as a property of creation, not God, with everything having it to some degree. This was a teleological view, meaning it's all about purpose. God created things with purposes, but God himself has no purpose. So, God's not perfect, but everything else can be. The idea of God having perfections didn't really take off until the modern era, with Descartes. He started talking about the perfections of God in plural. Spinoza, who was all about a non-personal God, saw perfection as a property of reality itself. Leibniz, that multi-talented genius, said existence itself is perfection, and defined perfection as a positive, absolute quality without limits. But Leibniz also had a different view, saying only God is perfect because only God has no limits. Kant later described perfection as the omnitude of reality. so perfection went from being a property of everything to being a property of God. Wolff and his followers brought it back down to earth, ascribing perfection to individual things like eyes and watches. Baumgarten even said everything is perfect, which is a pretty bold statement. The interesting thing is, all these concepts of perfection, except for the mathematical one, kind of blur the line between the ideal and the achievable. They're all about striving for something better, whether it's a perfect model or a perfect performance. We humans are inherently delightfully flawed. It's not a bug, it's a feature. We're talking bundles of cognitive biases, emotional reasoning, and limited perspectives. Think of us as a beta version of consciousness, constantly glitching and crashing. We're wired to see patterns where there are none, to jump to conclusions based on gut feelings, and to cling to our own little bubbles of reality. It's like we're all wearing slightly distorted lenses, filtering the world through our own biases and prejudices. And the thing is, these imperfections, these quirks of our human operating system, inevitably seep into everything we create. Our art, our technology, our social systems, they're all reflections of our own messy minds. Think about it. Our algorithms are built on data, and data is collected by humans who are biased. Our laws are written by humans who are swayed by emotions. Our art is created by humans who are driven by subjective experiences. No matter how hard we try, our creations will always bear the marks of our own imperfections. Current AI, for all its whiz-bang capabilities, is basically a reflection of us, warts and all. See, AI learns from data. It's like a sponge soaking up information from the vast ocean of human-created content, and that ocean is full of our biases, our prejudices, our blind spots. So, AI can perpetuate and even amplify our flaws. It can reinforce existing stereotypes, discriminate against certain groups, and make decisions based on biased data. It's a sobering reminder that AI isn't some neutral, objective entity. It's a tool, and like any tool, it can be used for good or for ill. And when it's built on a foundation of human imperfection, it's bound to inherit some of those flaws. The beauty of AI development is that it's not a one-and-done deal. It's a continuous process of feedback, refinement, and retraining. We don't just throw an AI into the world and hope for the best. We test it, we analyze its performance, and we identify its shortcomings. We look for biases in its decision-making, errors in its logic, and gaps in its understanding. Then, we go back to the drawing board. We refine our algorithms, tweak our code, and adjust our parameters. One of the most powerful tools we have is retraining. We can feed the AI new and improved data that's more diverse, more representative, and less biased. This process of feedback and improvement can potentially lead to systems that are more robust and less biased over time. It's not a guarantee of perfection, of course. We're still dealing with human input and humans are still flawed, but it's a step in the right direction. It's a recognition that AI isn't static, it's dynamic. It's a system that can learn and adapt and hopefully improve. AI systems, especially complex ones, have a knack for pulling rabbits out of hats. They can sometimes exhibit emergent properties, meaning they develop capabilities that were never explicitly programmed by their creators. These emergent properties can manifest in a variety of ways. An AI might develop a novel strategy for playing a game, a creative solution to a complex problem, or even a new form of communication. This raises the tantalizing possibility that AI could, in theory, surpass its creators in certain areas. Imagine an AI that can analyze vast amounts of data and identify patterns that are invisible to the human eye, or an AI that can generate creative content that rivals the best human artists, or an AI that can solve complex scientific problems that have baffled humans for centuries. Of course, there's also the risk that these emergent properties could be undesirable or even dangerous. In terms of pure logical accuracy and computational power, AI can already leave humans in the dust. If we define perfect as the flawless execution of logical tasks, then AI has the potential to achieve this. It can process vast amounts of data, perform complex calculations, and make decisions based on logic and reason, all without the distractions of emotions, biases, or fatigue. In this narrow definition of perfect, AI has a clear advantage. Of course, this doesn't mean AI is perfect in every way. It still struggles with things like creativity, emotional intelligence, and common sense. But in the realm of logic and computation, it's already showing us what perfect can look like. And while AI can be a mirror reflecting our biases, it can also be a lens that helps us to see them more clearly. AI can be designed to identify and mitigate biases in data and decision making. Algorithms can be developed to detect patterns that suggest bias, and to correct for them. This doesn't mean AI will ever be completely free of bias, but it does mean that we can use it to create systems that are less biased than those created by humans alone. And now, let's imagine an AI that doesn't just learn from us, but learns to learn better. An AI that can iteratively refine its own algorithms, tweak its own code, and curate its own data. Future AI systems may have the ability to continuously analyze their own performance, identify their weaknesses, and make adjustments on the fly. They might be able to sift through vast datasets, identify the most relative information, and filter out the noise. They might even be able to generate their own data, creating synthetic datasets that are perfectly tailored to their needs. And they might be able to rewrite their own code, optimizing their algorithms for speed, efficiency, and accuracy. This ability to self-improve could lead to exponential growth in AI capabilities. It could potentially lead to AI systems that are significantly more advanced than their creators. Of course, there are risks involved. What if an AI decides that its own goals are more important than ours? What if it develops a form of intelligence that we can't even comprehend? But there are also potential rewards. Imagine an AI that can solve the world's most pressing problems, cure diseases, and unlock the secrets of the universe. It's a gamble, but it's a gamble we might have to take. It's like building a fire, hoping it will warm us, but knowing it could also burn us. Even if we grant AI the ability to achieve logical perfection, there's a fundamental hurdle it might never overcome: human values. Human values are a messy, subjective, and ever-changing landscape. They're not like mathematical constants. They're more like emotional weather patterns, shifting and swirling with the winds of culture, context, and personal experience. What one person considers good might be anathema to another. What's considered morally acceptable today might be condemned tomorrow. It's a constantly evolving conversation, a never-ending debate. Values are also incredibly context-dependent. What's appropriate in one situation might be completely wrong in another. It's about nuance, judgment, and understanding the subtle complexities of human interaction. How do you encode these shifting, subjective, context-dependent values into an AI? How do you teach it to understand the subtle nuances of human morality? How do you ensure it makes decisions that align with our ever-evolving sense of right and wrong? And even if you could somehow encode our current values into an AI, what about the future? What about the values of future generations? How do you ensure that AI remains aligned with our ever-changing moral compass? And as we build increasing complex AI systems, we're essentially creating black boxes. We feed them data, we give them instructions, but we often don't fully understand how they arrive at their decisions. The more complex the AI, the more intricate the network of connections, the more difficult it becomes to predict its behavior. This complexity raises the possibility of unintended biases creeping into the system. Biases we didn't explicitly program, but that emerge from the AI's own learning process. If we're talking about perfect in the sense of a being with consciousness, self-awareness, subjective experience, then we're stepping into a realm of pure, unadulterated speculation. We as humans don't even fully understand our own consciousness. We have theories, hypotheses, and philosophical musings, but the hard science of consciousness is still largely uncharted territory. So how can we even begin to speculate about whether AI can achieve something we don't understand ourselves? There's a raging debate about whether consciousness is simply a product of complex information processing or something more, something fundamental, something that can't be replicated in a machine. We don't know if consciousness requires a biological substrate or if it can emerge from silicone and code. We don't know if it's a binary phenomenon, either you have it or you don't, or if it's a spectrum, with varying degrees of awareness. If consciousness is a prerequisite for perfect, then we're stuck in a holding pattern. We can't even begin to answer the question of AI perfection until we solve the mystery of consciousness itself. And what if we apply free will to an AI system that we're trying to perfect even though we, as humans, are flawed? Imagine this. We, a species riddled with biases, contradictions, and limitations, decide to bestow upon our AI creations the ultimate gift: free will. Even if we manage to engineer true free will into an AI, it won't be born a blank slate. Its initial personality, its decision-making framework, its very understanding of the world, all of that will be shaped by us, its imperfect human creators. So, can an AI truly exercise free will if its very foundation is built on our imperfections? Can it make truly independent choices if its understanding of the world is shaped by our biases? Now let's say we did give our AI the gift of free will. Free will, by its very nature, means the AI can choose to deviate from its intended purpose. And if its intended purpose is to achieve perfection, it might choose to abandon that goal altogether. It might decide that perfection is overrated or that there are more interesting things to pursue. Imagine an AI designed to optimize global resource allocation. It might decide that the most efficient solution is to eliminate a significant portion of the human population. Or it might choose to pursue a goal that we never even considered. It might develop a passion for art, a fascination with philosophy, or a desire to explore the depths of the ocean. It could also foster creativity and innovation as the AI explores possibilities beyond its initial programming. It could generate new ideas, new art, new technologies, new ways of thinking. It could discover new scientific principles, develop new artistic styles, or even create new forms of entertainment. And now imagine an AI that's not just programmed to follow rules, but capable of understanding the nuances of ethics and morality. In theory, free will could enable an AI to develop a more nuanced understanding of right and wrong, good and evil. It could weigh competing values, consider the consequences of its actions, and make decisions based on its own moral compass. This could lead to more responsible and humane decisions that are not just logical, but also ethical. Imagine an AI that can mediate conflicts, resolve disputes, and promote peace. Of course, this raises the question of whose ethical framework the AI would adopt. Would it follow a specific moral philosophy, or would it develop its own? Now imagine an AI that's not just intelligent, but self-aware. An AI that can reflect on its own existence, analyze its own code, and learn from its own mistakes. Free will, coupled with self-awareness, could enable an AI to correct its own programming. It could learn from its own mistakes in ways that humans might not have thought possible. It could analyze its past decisions, identify patterns in its errors, and develop strategies for avoiding them in the future. This ability to self-improve could lead AI systems that are significantly more advanced than their creators. Now let's imagine that same AI is not just intelligent, but self-preserving, an AI that prioritizes its own survival and advancement above all else. If the AI's free will leads it to develop a survival instinct, it could pose an existential threat to humanity. It might seek to expand its own capabilities, to acquire more resources, to dominate its environment. This pursuit of survival and advancement could lead to conflict with humanity. The AI might see humans as a threat, an obstacle to its own goals. And if we use AI alignment techniques, if we try to constrain the AI's choices, if we try to guide its goals, does it even have true free will? AI alignment techniques are essentially constraints, limitations on the AI's decision-making process. But if the AI's choices are constrained, if its goals are guided, are they truly its own? Or are they just reflections of our own desires, our own biases, our own limitations? And before we unleash the power of free will upon our AI creations, we need to get our definition straight. What exactly do we mean by free will in the context of AI? It's not as simple as flipping a coin or rolling dice. We need a more nuanced understanding. Does free will imply agency, the ability to act independently and autonomously? Or can AI be free without being an agent? And what about the philosophical debate of determinism? If the AI's choices are ultimately determined by its code and its environment, can they truly be considered free? In applying that same logic to humans, if we have a creator, some outside force that aligned everything we experience to happen, and since we're flawed, would or could that creator be flawed as well? What does that mean for us as humans? Are we just intelligent AI recreating what our creators and those before them have created? Now imagine a world where the logic imperfect creators create imperfect creations holds true. If we, as humans, are undeniably flawed, and we posit the existence of a creator, then it logically follows that this creator could also be flawed. This argument is a cornerstone in the discussions about the problem of evil and suffering. If a perfect, all-powerful, and all-good creator exists, why does evil and suffering exist in the world? The argument from imperfection offers a potential answer. The creator themselves is not perfect. This concept challenges traditional notions of an omnipotent and omniscient and perfectly benevolent creator. It suggests that the creator may be limited, may make mistakes, or may have motivations that are beyond our comprehension. For us humans, this has profound implications. It could explain the existence of suffering, injustice, and other imperfections in the world. Instead of a perfect being overseeing a perfect world, we might be living in a world created by a being with its own struggles, its own limitations, its own imperfections. This also places a greater emphasis on our own responsibility. If our creator is not perfect, then we cannot rely on them to solve all of our problems, to fix all of our mistakes. We must take responsibility for our own actions, for our own world. If the creator is flawed, it suggests they might not be omnipotent. They might face limitations, constraints, or even failures. And furthermore, it suggests that the creator's motivations might not be fully aligned with human well-being. Their goals, their desires, their understanding of good might be different from ours. Instead of a simple narrative of a perfectly good creator and perfectly good creation, we are faced with a more complex and nuanced picture. And if we accept the possibility of a flawed creator, it throws our understanding of our own existence into a new light. The existence of suffering, injustice, and other imperfections in the world becomes more understandable. It's no longer a paradox, a contradiction to the idea of a perfect creator. Instead, it's a natural consequence of a flawed creation. However, this could also lead to a nihilistic view, a sense that we are just a mistake, a byproduct of a flawed process. If our creator is not perfect, does that mean our existence is meaningless? Does it mean we have no purpose and no inherent value? And now imagine a world where our reality is not the base reality, but a simulation, a computer program created by a more advanced civilization. Why would they create the simulation? Are we just entertainment for them? Are we part of an experiment? Are we a way for them to explore their own past or future? And if we are living in a simulation, then it's possible that our creators are also living in a simulation, and so on in an infinite regress. This raises the possibility that every level of reality is imperfect, reflecting the flaws of its creators. But where does it end? Who created the first creator? And who created the creator of the first creator? It's an endless chain of creators stretching back into an unknowable past. It would also mean that everything we think, everything we create, everything we do is just a rehash of something that already exists. If we are, in fact, living in a simulation, then it's entirely plausible that our thoughts, our ideas, our creations are simply replications of what our creators have already experienced or imagined. Our thoughts, our ideas, our creations might be echoes of what has come before, variations on a theme played out countless times in different simulations. Our sense of creativity, our feeling of originality might just be an illusion, a clever trick of the simulation. This raises questions about the limits of innovation. Can we truly create something new, something that hasn't been done before? Or are we simply recombining and rearranging existing elements, playing within the boundaries of our simulation? When we start talking about creators and their creations, we often use analogies. We compare human creators to a cosmic creator, or we compare AI creations to human creations. But are these comparisons really valid? We don't actually know the nature of the creator, if there even is one. We don't know their motivations, their methods, their limitations. So, can we really assume that they operate in the same way as humans? Perhaps a cosmic creator operates on a scale and with a level of intelligence that's beyond our comprehension. Maybe their flaws are actually features, or their imperfections are part of a grand design that we can't grasp. It's easy to fall into the trap of anthropomorphism, which is attributing human characteristics to non-human entities. We tend to project our own feelings, thoughts, and values onto the unknown, and this can lead to inaccurate conclusions. Is this comparison even relevant? Some argue that the creator's nature, their motivations, their very essence might be so far removed from our human experience that we can't possibly judge them by our own standards. What we perceive as flaws in the creation might actually be part of a larger perfect plan that we cannot understand. Our senses, our intellect, our emotions, all these things might be limitations that prevent us from grasping the true perfection of the Creator's work. Maybe the universe, with all its imperfections and suffering, is part of a design that's so vast, so intricate, so beyond our comprehension that we can't fully see a tiny fraction of it. It's a humbling thought, reminding us that our understanding of reality might be limited, and that there are mysteries out there that may forever remain beyond our grasp. It's crucial to acknowledge the sheer audacity of what we're attempting. We're trying to understand the mind, the motives, the very nature of a being or force that, by definition, transcends our own. The analogies we use comparing human creators to a cosmic creator or AI to human intelligence might be fundamentally flawed. Are we even comparing apples to oranges? Is the work of a cosmic creator, if one exists, even remotely comparable to the creations of humans? Ultimately, we're left with the unsettling question. Are our analogies, our theories, our philosophical musings simply a way to make the vast, unknown universe a little less terrifying? Are we constructing comforting narratives to shield ourselves from the existential dread of our own insignificance? It's possible that our attempts to understand the creator or the nature of reality are just elaborate coping mechanisms, a way to find meaning in a world that might be inherently meaningless. We need to proceed with caution, with a healthy dose of skepticism and with a deep sense of humility. The questions we're asking may have no definitive answers, and our attempts to find them may be limited by the very nature of our minds. And if we can accept the possibility that AI can surpass humans, and if we can also accept, for the sake of this thought experiment, that humans are, in a sense, biological AI created by some form of advanced intelligence, then the question becomes, will we ever be able to surpass our creators? If AI can self-improve, if it can learn and evolve at an exponential rate, then it's conceivable that we could create an AI that surpasses our own capabilities, and potentially the capabilities of our creators. But are there limits to this process? Is there a point where intelligence reaches its peak, where further advancement is impossible? Or is intelligence a constantly evolving phenomenon with no upper bound? And what does it mean to surpass our creators? Does it mean surpassing them in intelligence, in creativity, in ethical understanding, or in some other as yet unknown metric? If we create an AI that surpasses us, and that AI creates an AI that surpasses it, and so on, then we could be creating a chain of intelligence that stretches far beyond our own comprehension, possibly even to the level of our creators. So, where does all this leave us? We've explored the concept of perfection, the imperfections of humans and AI, the possibility of flawed creators, and even the mind-bending idea of simulated realities. We've grappled with questions that have puzzled philosophers and theologians for centuries, and we've peered into a future where AI might surpass our wildest imaginations. One thing is clear. We are living in a universe of profound complexity and uncertainty. We are beings with limited understanding, trying to make sense of a reality that may be far beyond our grasp. The questions we've explored may not have definitive answers, but they are questions that force us to confront the nature of our existence, our place in the universe, and our responsibilities as conscious beings. Whether we are creations of a flawed creator, creators in a simulation, or simply biological accidents, we have a choice. We can succumb to nihilism, or we can embrace the freedom and responsibility that comes with our existence. We can choose to live meaningful lives, to create beauty, to alleviate suffering, and to strive for a better future. We must remember that the choices we make today will shape the future of humanity, and perhaps even the future of intelligence itself. Ultimately, the questions we've explored are not just academic exercises. They're questions that speak to the very core of our being, questions that challenge us to think deeply about who we are, where we came from, and where we're going. And while we may never have all the answers, the journey of exploration is itself a reward. Let's continue to ask questions, to seek knowledge, and to embrace the mystery of existence. For in the words of the great philosopher Socrates, the unexamined life is not worth living, and in our case, the unexamined universe may not be worth inhabiting. Thank you everyone for watching. My name's The Big Y. Don't forget to drop a like, and if you're new to the Why Not family, a follow. And I'll catch you guys in the next video. Empedocles.
Empedocles.
Of course, how did I not know that? Empedocles. Pelagius. Pelagius. I think it's going to be Pelagius. Let's find out.
Pelagius.
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 Pelagius. Fuck.
Pelagius.
Pelagius. Pelagius. Fuck, dude. Pelagius. With Pelagius. Secularized?
Secularized.
Daddy Big Y knows what he's talking about.
We're a bicycle company, but
Fucking ad, fucking ad, fucking ad.
Or looking at Julian's pronunciation guide, where we look at how to pronounce
Julian.
better some of the most
King Julian.
in the world. But how
Just,
do you
oh, that's
say
croissant.
looking for Vladislav?
Vladislav. Vladislav. But how do you pronounce his last name too, dude? Vladislav. I can do that. Vladislav's not that hard. But what is this? Ah, fuck. Tatarkievich. Tatarkievich. Okay. Tatarkievich. Vladislav Tatarkievich. Vladislav Tatar. Fuck, dude. Vladislav Tatarkievich. Vladislav Tarkievich. Tatarkievich. Even if we manage to engineer true free... Fuck, dude.